Okay, good morning, folks, from Pipers'Persuasion again. This is the 103rd episode, I believe, and we're just working our way around the second century of interviews for Pipers'Persuasion. The date today is Tuesday, 17th of September, and it's 2024. I started this way back 2010. So we're still going, we're still healthy, and the sun's shining out here in Kilmarnock, where I'm recording, and it's a Zoom call with our guest today, Peter Snaddon. Peter is in his hometown of Kirkcaldy, I believe. Peter will get me right about that in a wee second or two. And comfortably ensconced there. And we're going to discuss Peter's life in piping. And just a wee headline grabber before you start switching off. He did study under Captain John McClellan and Peter Light Music, Ronald McCallum of Inverary and Jimmy Young. That's Peter's background in piping. He also has a background with brass bands, and we'll discuss that as well. In fact, he says he's the only pipe major to have registered legally with two Grade 1 bands at the same time. The main point today is going to be, he's a judge and has been for many years with the RSPBA. And Peter, I know, will have his views to put across to you and be very informative. And I'm now going to ask Peter to have a wee word with us. You might as well start, Peter, about your early days in piping under Pipe Major Alfred Downey.
Right. Well, good morning, Alan. It's nice to see you here from Kirkcaldy, and the weather is nice and sunny here too. Yeah. Well, background. I started my piping career off here in Kirkcaldy back in 1962 or thereabouts, when I was 10 years old. And I was very lucky to have been put in touch with Pipe Major Alf Downey, who was Pipe Major of the 6th, 7th Black Watch here in Kirkcaldy. Alf was a very good player, and I was very lucky to have him as a one-to-one teacher from the start. So I did get a good grounding in technique and all the rest of it, and Alf also started me with my first Biebrach, which was Macpherson's Lament, I recall. From there, I went to the local BB band, where I spent some time, but during the summer holidays from school, I used to go and stay with my grandparents through in Sochi by Alloa. And my grandfather introduced me to a gentleman, Sammy Drummond. Now, Sammy was an ex-Argyll, a good friend of Andrew Pickheathley's. Sammy is also the uncle, incidentally, of Colin Drummond, well-known solo piper back at that time. Sammy was also a very good player. But he took me up to the drill hall in Stirling and introduced me to the 7th Argyll's pipe band at the age of 12. And I played as a guest piper with them for a few years and played my first pipe band competitions with them back then. Pipe major was Chuck Smith, father of Roy Smith and Ian Smith from Denny. And that's where I met them, and we were great friends forever after. So there, from there, I was approached at the age of 14 by a deputation from what became 153 Regiment, Royal Corps of Transport, headed up by Jimmy Gray, who had former leading drummer with Muirhead and Sons at the time, and Jackie Smith came to the house along with him as well, and several others. So I was recruited into that band, which was the 51st Highland Divisional Column RASC at that time. For insurance purposes, I think they signed me on in the cadet force so I could travel with the band, etc. But my very first gig with them was at the Royal Albert Hall in London, which was the Royal Corps of Transport Corps Rally. So it was quite a big step for me as a 14-year-old to be playing in the Royal Albert Hall.
Aye, great,
So
aye.
I went back there and did the Festival of Remembrance back in 1973, I think it was, once Jimmy Young became pipe major of the band. So yes, and then of course through my association with Argyles, I met my good friend Duncan Smith in our teens. We've been great friends ever since. Duncan went to the Edinburgh Police in '71, and we all know, what went on from there with the pipe band wise, But yes, I had a few life-changing experiences back then, Alan. Yeah. And then, of course, became pipe major of 153 Regiment in 1974. Yes, it was. After Jimmy Young left. It's 73, we got sixth in the World Championship, which was a fantastic result for us back at that time at Ayr. Yeah. So that's basically my competing career in pipe bands. Went with them, up until 1982 when I finished with the Royal Corps of Transport and transferred to the 5-1 Highland in Perth as pipe major up there. So solo piping wise, I did compete a bit in my youth, but I was also learning brass through my youth too. And I was quite a keen brass player too. And so the solo piping eventually took a back seat as I had too many other musical interests going at the same time. Yeah. And then, I went and studied brass as a tuba player at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama back in 1970. So the good thing about the brass band world was the brass bands competed in the winter time, the pipe bands in the summer, so they didn't really clash.
That's amazing.
So that's a potted history.
You would just staying on brass for a second. You would be thoroughly educated with RSCMD. Where were they situated at that time?
Well, at that time it was in the corner of Buchanan Street.
And
okay. St George's Place, which is now Nelson Mandela Place.
I know where you are.
The red building on the corner, which is now a sort of conglomerate of various businesses running there.
They moved up to top of Hope Street now.
That's right. That was long after I left.
Yeah. Now, but the point I was going to make is you'd be educated on music.
Yes,
the full musical background rather than a minimal background that pipers get.
Yes, exactly.
You would recognise, I suppose, far earlier than the rest of us, the pipe chanter wasn't pitched to A, it was pitched nearer to B. I suppose you would recognise that, eh?
Oh yes, well, we did quite a lot of work. I did, a few engagements with the Royal Corps of Transport staff band back.
Yes,
and that was based in Aldershot. So I was able to communicate in musical terms with the director of music there, and we worked. We did a bit of playing together, but unfortunately, we didn't have much more than Amazing Grace to do at that time.
But the point I'm trying to make here is that you've got a full musical background rather than anything else. So you got a comprehension of the full thing right across the board, as far as pitches and keys and everything else are concerned.
Well, I did higher music at school on brass, My one regret, you had to be able to do keyboard harmony. And my one regret that I didn't learn to play, I didn't have the opportunity really to learn to play the piano properly in my youth. But I can find my way around the keyboard in a sort of like a blind man would,
But no, that's interesting. That it really is. because in the 100th episode, I explored the question of Piper's musicians, and I got quite a positive result here because I interviewed 6 people, and you'd have been quite interested in that one because we finished up with Duncan Nicholson trying to explain where our pitch is in relation to other instruments and historically how it came about and all the rest of it, So,
Yes.
If you've got any comments to make on that.
Well, to be, on the humorous side, some of my musician colleagues, military band people, would suggest that pipers aren't musicians and the pipes isn't a proper musical instrument. But I think they do that just to wind me up rather than to get any serious response. So I treat those comments with the contempt they deserve.
But it's always been a humorous thing in that side. But I think that these days, because of the fact that the pipers are going to RSMD, National Piping College, and various other wonderful places, that they can be classed as musicians because they are getting a full all-round education in music, and they can stand four square with any other musician when it comes to it.
That's right, Alan. When I went to the academy, as we called it then, if it wasn't classical music, it just didn't happen. They had no interest in anything outside opera singing, instrument, piano, anything that would be on the classical concert platform. Nowadays, you've got opportunities in music to study there, jazz, traditional music, and all the rest of it. And I think that's largely thanks to the foresight of the John Wallace, who was the principal back then, another famous Fife brass player, who was the principal of the conservatoire back then, who I think tried to broaden the horizons and as far as studies in music are concerned. Yeah, great thing. It's a great thing that traditional music is there now too.
And Dougie Pincock did that up north with his college, and various other Isilmaros that are doing that, and the National Piping Centre under a new director, they're giving everybody a full opportunity of folk music and everything else.
Absolutely.
It's not an extreme Peter, it's my favourite subject, but there's more to piping than just Peter, and there's more to brass bands than just classical music.
Absolutely.
So everybody's tending to go towards the centre to some extent, and that can only be good in terms of an all-round appreciation of music. Mm-hmm. Okay. You had all these years with the Army territorials. I don't want to wipe that out completely. You have given us some dates there, and you did register with the Grade 1 band, the 153 Highland Regiment. No, that was different from Weatherston's. I said 227.
The 277.
277.
Yes, 277 Argyle's was John's band back in the early 60s.
And they won the World Championship.
61 was it, or something like
62, that? I think, in Ireland.
But the 277 regiment was a Royal Artillery Battery.
Yeah.
Which was affiliated to the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders.
Yes.
And in 1967, with a big reorganisation of the armed forces at that time, these regiments were disbanded. Like 7th Argyll's, they all became one big battalion. Black Watch and all the rest of it all became one one battalion of the 51st Highland Volunteers, which I finished up with. Yeah, and the 153 Regiment survived, changed its name, but survived that reorganisation. And then after that was, for some time, was the only Grade 1 pipe band of any kind in the British Army.
What size of band was it when you had it?
Well, we had about 25 or so, up to 30 at one point in the band. They were quite a big band. Not all competing players, but some were handy for parades and all the rest of it. But certainly most of the guys were up to the standard of Grade 1 competition. Yeah.
At that time, anyway, 12-14 was the sort of a standard pipe corps size.
That's right. Considering then, as a pipe major, you had to do all the setting up work yourself.
Aye, exactly.
Setting up and tuning and.
But you didn't have too many drummers taking up all the seats in the bus either. You just about 4 side drummers and a bass.
That's it. 4 sides, bass and 2 tenors usually, eh?
The tenors. You went on to be an instructor with the Army Cadet Force.
Yes. Well, after I finished with the Territorial Army back in 2006, Alan, I had been, involved in some teaching of young people before that, of course. Back in the 70s, my good friend Jim Penman, along with John Cushney, Jim played in the 153 with me for years. Jim, teacher of many good pipers. They formed the YMCA pipe band in Kirkcaldy, and I used to my house was right across the road from it, and he and John Cushney used to send their more advanced youngsters across to my house for a wee lesson on a Tuesday night. So we had James Murray there, Jim Murray from Cooper. I taught Jim his first Peabrook. And I didn't know at that time, when he was a 12-year-old, that he would go on to be a gold medalist, and his young brother a double gold medalist, but there we are.
A wonderful piping family, really.
Absolutely. Aye, indeed. Yes, it was a pleasure to know them as youngsters. Although I didn't have any hand in teaching Doogie, but certainly Jimmy came to my house as a youngster, But after I finished with the Territorial Army in 2006, I got in touch with a local Army Cadet unit here because I was at a loose end. And then I started teaching the youngsters up in Glenrothes there, and then eventually went on to the Cadets National Training Team. And we used to run cadres up in Inverness and other places where we took, classes. And so I wouldn't, a lot of the youngsters now are in their 30s and a lot of them playing with Grade 1 bands. So it's great to see them around, although I wouldn't take any credit for having taught them. There's certainly a lot of them passed through our hands, and I like to think we helped them on their way.
So where are you based with the instruction of the Army Cadet Force?
Well, to start, it was in Glenrothes, but they used to meet in various locations around the country, at various, where cadets had units established, such as, Glenrothes, even through in Glasgow. Redford Barracks was our main area for concentration, and then at Easter time we would go for a week with the whole National Cadets Pipes and Drums. They virtually came from all over Britain, as far afield as Kent and
That's
Orkney.
great.
And they came together in concentrations. We used to do that at Cameron Barracks in Inverness at Easter time. And for a long time under Jimmy Stout, who was the cadet chief instructor at the time, Major Jimmy Stout, and my good friend, Queen's Own Highlanders.
Great stuff.
Oh yes.
And have you finished doing that? Are you still doing that?
Well, yes. Now that I'm a septuagenarian, I think it's probably time to hang up the spurs. Getting a wee bit, and some of the young people that went through when I was teaching them are now there as instructors themselves. So
Right.
I feel now it's just time to hand over the reins to the younger generation and let them get on with it.
That's a great background. That you're nothing to do with the Ulster Training Corps bands or anything.
No, no.
No, that's a different entity
Yes,
entirely.
different altogether. This was the Tri-Service Cadet Force. It took in, Royal Air Force cadets, Army Cadet Force, and to a small extent the Navy cadets.
Okay.
Yeah, but yes, I mean from all over the country. But that was the limit of that. There were no other organisations involved in it. And of course, we ran the PDQB system and got and they still do, of course, for to get the young people certificated in music.
Okay, can you explain that briefly?
Well, up to PDQ level 6 mainly. But
so explain PDQ for the guys out in Hawaii.
The Piping and Drumming Qualifications Board.
Right, okay.
Yes, which is it falls in with the SQA levels, which the Scottish Qualifications
Authority.
It's got a different name now, I think. But
aye, they were trying to disband it, but they've never managed it.
Yes, well, I mean, up to SQA level 6 is about the equivalent of a higher or advanced higher, and it is a recognised educational qualification on their young CVs, so it's got to be a help to them for their future.
Absolutely.
And it was a change from the old days when we just had we had certification in the Institute of Piping, the RSPBA certification system, but these qualifications didn't hold for anything outside the organisations.
Yes.
Where now the SQA certificates do.
Aye, they're widely recognised outside the pipe band circles. Aye.
They're recognised by the Scottish Qualifications Authority. Yeah.
That's excellent.
That's good. Yeah.
And what is the background to becoming a pipe band judge? And they understand since 1982.
Well, when I left the 153 Regiment, I had various offers to go to other bands. And one was from Ian MacLeod, Edinburgh Police. He was with the British Caledonian Airways at the time. Ian phoned me up, this would be around about 1982, or maybe slightly before it, looking for a pipe sergeant, but I was still keen on the 153 Regiment at the time, so I turned that down. And then I had a deputation from Muirheads and Sons arrived at my house one day, headed up by Jackie Smith and company, and they wanted me to go, and after Bob Hardy had retired, and they invited me to take up the cudgels with the Muirheads. But again, unfortunately, Muirheads was near its demise by that time. So I didn't go. So I didn't really fancy working under anybody else as having been a pipe major in grade 1. So I stuck with the TA. After all, the TA paid me a fairly good part-time salary.
Yes.
Which went on for quite a number of years after that, I'm pleased to say, until 2006. But digressing a wee bit, I was approached by, John McInnes and John McAllister. At that time, joining the adjudicators panel was more or less by invitation. So I think it started with trying to expand the RSPBA education programme. And I worked with John McInnes and John McAllister. Ian Kennedy and Jim Wark were involved too to a very large extent. And we used to meet and sort of discuss ways forward with RSPBA education. And it was just through that I kind of fell into the adjudicators panel through John McAllister mainly John McInnes. So did a few training runs, and at that time they did ask the adjudicators to have the RSPBA intermediate certificate at that time, but there were no other musical qualifications required at that time, and it was mainly people joined the adjudicators panel then by invitation. Gradually, of course, they started looking for more qualifications, etc. Again, so I think quite rightly too. But I think it's also more important that people that we have on the adjudicators panel, as well as just being musically qualified, they've also got a profile and a reputation as having done the business having done the business in the business of pipe banding, and have a proven track record of achievement, which is the way that the panel is heading now. So not it is necessary to have to be musically qualified as far as academically. But those who maybe just fall slightly short of that are now welcomed onto the panel if they have the reputation. For example, some long-serving Grade 1 pipe majors leading drummers might have not bothered to get themselves these qualifications. But certainly prove themselves otherwise, and more than prove themselves otherwise. So that's the sort of state of affairs that's now at today, Alan.
Yes. So that's how the pipe band judges have been picked and are currently been chosen. Have you got anything to do with the education system, the background, providing information and the training system for judges?
Well, yes, with all of us on the APMB, the Adjudicators Panel Management Board now, of which I'm the vice convener at the moment, we do have the adjudicator. It used to be the Adjudicators Panel Training Group, but we now call it the Adjudicators Panel Information Team.
Okay, we're discussing the training there, and that's fairly clear that everybody is involved. The current chaps there are involved in the education, training, and giving information to the new chaps coming along. And there's a constant circulation because you've got a cut-off age of 75, I understand.
Well, that's it, Alan, at the moment, yes. It's the official retirement age for all officials in the RSPBA is 70 at the moment, but we can extend to 75 provided we can declare that we're fit medically and to carry on doing the job.
I think it's medically it's fine, but you need not only the mental stamina, which has got to be quite rigorous because you're concentrating on upwards of, say, in first grade alone. Well, it's down from previous years. It's maybe the average of 10, but right up to about 14 or something like that in the World Pipe Band Championships. But in the lesser grades, you've got, say, 20, 30 in a grade and all that. So that's the mental stamina, but you've also got to have the physical stamina to stand in your feet all day in the cold, in the rain, or the dreadful heat. As we don't get a lot of that these days, but no, that's a consideration for folk in their 70s.
Well, perhaps, Alan, but I do know a few of my colleagues who were well able and fit enough to do after the most adjudicators retire when they feel that they need to.
Could you maybe explain to the audience when you're actually marking up and we'll talk about position in the competition field in a minute too. When you're actually marking up your sheets, what are you aiming to do there, and how do you discriminate between the bands and that sort of thing? Just a general commentary as to what's going through your mind when you're listening to a performance.
Well, each of us hears, I don't know, it's a very personal thing, Alan. We can't get inside each other's heads, so we don't know what somebody else is thinking. We can only judge it from the perspective of our own knowledge and experience and musical preference. You know, for me, as an ensemble judge, I quite enjoy judging ensemble more than I do the piping discipline in isolation. And I don't think we should. We're judging pipe band performance, and my view is that the best band should win. So if you're judging piping, drumming, ensemble, I tend not to just judge piping in isolation. I try to listen to the whole musical package, and one can have an effect on the other. But I don't know about others. Do others judge their disciplines in isolation? We just simply don't know, as we can't. We're not mind readers. But for me, the music always comes first. It comes to me before technique and tone quality, which of course are vital too. But if a band is producing a great performance with the feeling, emotion, and the energy being projected through the music, that's the performance for me. Over the years, especially with grade one, we're talking about, you know, I've had I've heard performances where that are very, very difficult to criticise. In fact, I have written on sheets there's little to find fault with in that performance, you know, and some of the best of them are very memorable. They stick in my mind, for example. You know, many of Field Marshal Montgomery's performances over the year have just been outstanding. The others, like Simon Fraser, of course. St Lawrence O'Toole in 2010, I had the pleasure to judge their medley that day. And in fact, this year at the Worlds on the Saturday afternoon, the performance by Inverary for me was one of the finest I've ever heard.
I must agree that's. I doubt if that will ever be replicated in the standard. You know, it was almost one. I know. We say that every year, but
yes,
the standard this year was extremely high.
Absolutely.
And yeah. I heard every performance. I was sitting in the house here and I listened to all on the internet.
Yeah.
So, and over the 2 days, I heard every performance in the 4 competitions. And it was surprisingly good right over the board. I thought Dunedin played well. And although they were last, that's fine. Somebody's got to be last, unfortunately. But there wasn't a bad band there. No. And everybody played extremely well. Crossbelt, I thought it was terrific. 78 Fraser Hellner's a wonderful performance.
Wouldn't be there unless they were good bands.
No, they're all terrific, you know. And yes. It must. I felt for the judges this year because I said, how the hell do you separate that lot out? You know, and the expectations of Boghall, of course, after coming up last year.
Yes,
but Inverary were outstanding. Absolutely.
Well, you know, that performance, as I said, you know, over the outstanding performances I've heard over the years, is certainly up there with the best. There's no doubt about that. And sometimes you've got a clear winner, and you can comfortably say that's the one. But of course, music is a very personal experience. I
Very
remember I had a
aye.
music teacher when I was in my teens, a school music teacher, who said to me, you know, music is a very personal thing. Um, uh, you know, I might like something that you don't like, and I'm just talking about within a pipe band performance. A certain interpretation you might like if it's a Pibroch, and another adjudicator might not like it so much. So it's down to personal preference a lot of the time.
And
So
that's a wonderful thing human beings have as differences in perspective, opinion, and everything else. If everybody was the same, life would be boring.
well,
I
that's
used I used to do a bit of painting way back in the 80s. I was quite good at one point, and I sold a lot of stuff, and I sold all my watercolors and pastels that I did. It was quite well taught, one thing and another. But I remember taking 6 folk into a room and letting them see 6 of my paintings. I said, pick one that you like. And they all picked a different painting.
right.
And that just proved the whole point of what we're trying to get across here, that everybody is a very, very subjective thing. And
Well, exactly.
because somebody in the crowd doesn't understand why you picked them, well, that's their problem. It's not yours. You're picking and doing the best you can.
Yes.
And there's, would you care to make any comment at all in the perceived bias over all the years by, the crowd that's standing over there behind the ropes, say, oh, yeah, he's biased against this, that, and the next thing.
Right. Yeah.
What's your experience of that?
Well, I must say, Alan, when I was a competing pipe major myself, like a lot of people, I suppose I criticised the judges. The judges are hopeless. They don't know that a bee from a bull's foot, as the old saying goes, you know. And it wasn't until I started doing it myself that I realised how complex a job it was. You're listening, writing. You know, you're listening to one piece of music while you're still writing about the one before it. And then you've got then to collate your results and do all the admin involved in it. But I did find that when I joined the panel, the adjudicators that I sometimes thought were a bit hard on us, I found myself agreeing with their judging alongside them as colleagues. And my outcome was not too far removed from theirs, you know. And I thought, oh, well, it can't be that bad after all. I'm being a wee bit flippant there. But
No,
I think,
it's difficult. It's an understanding here, isn't it?
yes, I suppose everybody, or most people, we all have had a connection with a certain band or bands at one time or other, and we've become used to a style of playing that under the sort of, you know, if you worked under John McAllister or Tom McAllister or, you know, Ian McClellan or whoever, you become, that's the sort of style of playing that you, as an individual, probably favour. And I think any bias might come from that sort of thing rather than just personal bias like, oh, I don't like that band, so I mean, I'm going to put them down. I mean, what's the point in being a judge if you're going to do that? I think, well, in my own situation, there is no band that I ever played with is still competing. They all went defunct. So,
Aye.
so
Aye.
I've got no loyalties or connections with any band, and I never have had. So I can only speak for myself there. Uh, to me, whoever comes up and plays the best, right or wrong, or whoever thinks I'm right or whoever thinks I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. That's my honest opinion. And I'm sure that that's the way that my colleagues nowadays, I'm sure that's their attitude as well. But having said that, it's a very subjective activity. judging, you know.
Now, you mentioned a second ago, but listen, as an ensemble judge and what have you, some people, maybe even including myself, have wondered over the years why we have a drumming prize and why we don't have a piping prize.
Yes.
And I've gone on to express opinion elsewhere that there should be no such thing as a piping or a drumming prize or best bass drummer. I think that there should only be 3 or 4 ensemble judges judge the whole thing as a pipe band, and that's it, because it is a pipe band. And I've seen instances in the past where drum corps have just striven to be the best drum corps and ignored the pipe band performance.
Yes, well, I suppose there's always that danger. But, you know, having in the brass band world, in brass band competition, as well as the overall prize, and you've probably got no more than 2 adjudicators judging the whole music of the band. They're all ensemble judges, but they'll have prizes for the best solo cornet or the best euphonium or the best tuba section, depending on the competition. So they have that in that world as well. But I shouldn't think that one section would try to play louder than everybody else just to be heard, so they would get the tuba prize. You know, it's still, I think, I would hope that nowadays that in pipe bands that the members or the leaders are more musically aware than that. And I don't think, in recent experience judging grade 1, I don't really find that there seems to be a lot of energy coming from a drum corps. This drum corps is going for the drumming prize, and to hell with everybody else. I've never had that sort of you know, intuition. You know, it's you know, it's something that's never really struck me when I've been judging.
Okay,
so
fair
let's
enough.
hope. But however, that'll be up to the music board and the board of directors
Yeah,
in future
yeah.
to decide which way these things go.
Okay, no bother. And another wee point that the various observers have spoken about in the past is judges moving around the circle as a judge.
Yes.
So any comment to make by that?
Well, again, it's a personal point of view, Alan.
Aye.
When I judge ensemble, I prefer not to move around too much. And I like to be a reasonable distance away from the band. If you're judging piping and you're going round one side and then the other guy's going round the other, then you're only hearing part of the band. You're maybe only hearing a small section of the pipe corps.
Yeah.
At one time, at any given time.
Yes.
And any little nuances in tuning or any fingering technique or whatever are going to be more obvious the closer up you are. When you stand back, you get the bigger picture. And I think, I would like to see a situation where all adjudicators are judging from the same position. And perhaps the band's in some sort of concert formation.
Aye.
I know it leads to that difficulties where you've got an audience on 3 sides, or if it's and Piper's standing with their backs to the audience. But if they're surrounded by audience, they don't all have their backs to the audience.
Well, they've got round us in Brittany, for instance.
Yes,
where they've got the Concours de Bagad in Brest in February, and that's in a concert hall sort of type set up where the audience, the judges and everybody are just in the normal concert hall seating, and there's a stage there. And in the summer at L'Orient, for the second stage, they're in a football stadium and they are playing in the on the pitch of the football stadium facing the grandstand, and all the spectators, some 2,000 of them, are seated in the grandstand, and the 13 judges are in seats and tables in front of the concert platform on the pitch. So nobody's moving, everybody's saying, and everybody's hearing what's going on, all from the one perspective, if you like. So it can be done.
Oh, indeed.
And it might be that you'd need to have a complete re-examination of how to run events, maybe a first and second grade event, and then in another day run the other grades in a totally different format, such as what you've got just now. But so that leads me on quite nicely. I think I would like to ask the question. We were young, you and I, and we played MSRs in competitions, 50s, 60s, 70s, and then, 1970, they introduced the ensemble prize, and they introduced this medley format away from the MSRs, and it's been very successful. We don't need to go into the ins and outs of it. That's been studied elsewhere and spoken of elsewhere. But after this is 2024.
Yeah.
So since 1970, we've had that, and it's been very, very successful this year. Great music and everything else, but over a piece, are the organisation, RSPBA or anybody else, having a look at a different presentation, a different format of competition, of presenting the music or whatever?
Well, the answer to that, Alan, is yes, we have, from the adjudicators panel point of view. A few years ago, with the with the 50th anniversary of the medley competition coming up in 2000, it was suggested. In fact, it came from Terry Lee at one of our adjudicators panel AGMs, that we try to look at changing the format or developing it of the medley competition. Now, that went forward and not much came of it. In fact, I got a report back from one of the directors recently that the competing bands would prefer to leave it as it is. They're quite happy with it. But the adjudicators panel initiative was maybe to try to develop a more flexible approach to the medley performance, which some of them have done this year. Was it Inverary where they came on and they didn't play exactly 2 introductory 3-piece roles?
No, I played one and then something
else. That's right. Now, I was asked about that, had a conversation about that, and we looked at there's nothing in the rules that says a band must start with 2 3-piece roles. All it does, under the adjudication rules, it just says that adjudication will start from the first beat of the first roll. But nowhere in the rules does it say a pipe band performance has to commence with 2 3-piece rolls. And my view, and I suggested this, is that do away with the rules for medley competition altogether. I'm talking about for grade 1.
Yeah.
All they have to do is do away with the rules and let the bands develop it themselves. What I meant by that was, why start with 2 3-piece rolls? The only rule you need to have is a time limit on the performance.
Yeah.
And let the bands do what else they develop. in any art forms have got to develop.
It's a funny thing, sorry to interrupt you, it's a
Not at
funny
all.
thing, you're going round in a circle because back in 70, 71, 72, 73, other folk, I've been discussing this with others, that the bands did have more of a free form and a larger choice of tunes and everything else, and they I speak to Ian McClellan, says Ronnie Laurie even suggested interrupting the medley by the pipe stopping and a wee few bars with the drum corps herself, and then the pipes started striking back in again. Edinburgh Police didn't play Gaelic Air in the first one or two of their medley competitions. Other folk didn't play this, and other folk didn't play that. But so there's lots of ideas were explored initially, but it seemed to settle down into a format. And this is where we are just now.
Well,
and it's maybe needing a wee bit of rattle up.
Well, perhaps, Alan. But I remember back then what you're talking about, that it was suggested, and the memory's a bit vague now, but I remember myself, it was about trying to develop the medley and do different things in it.
Yeah.
And I phoned up Bob Nichol, it was, at headquarters, and I just on the very same point, I just asked, now, what if the pipers cut out and you maybe had a solo piper or a wee bit from the drum corps playing, and then the pipers all came back in again? What would happen if we did that? And the answer was, you'd be disqualified. In Bob's fairly brusque manner, you'll be disqualified. And that was it. Okay, thank you, Bob. And then we just put it to bed after that.
That was why. That's why Ian McClellan. That's exactly the Ian McClellan's response to Ronnie Laurie. He says, "Look, the judging panel's a lot older than you and I. So a lot more, they're not accept these new ideas so readily. So he says, if you want to win prizes, you've got to conform to some extent.
Well, yes, indeed. Well, I think now." I suppose, being one of the old judges now, I'd like to think that I'm forward thinking.
Yeah.
As far as musical development is concerned. And I think we should not be putting obstacles in the way. Okay, it was John McAllister who said to me when I joined the panel, not long after I joined the panel, who did say to me, and I remember this, that said, as judges, we are the upholders and keepers of the tradition. The music, it's traditional music we're listening to, and we should never lose sight of that. Now, to a certain extent, I do agree with that.
Aye, that's right. Aye, because you can just go right overboard,
yes,
and have electric guitars and everything.
We can just go too far with it,
and they just lose the plot completely.
Yes, and it's still, if it's going to remain Scottish traditional music, there have got to be some, we've got to try to uphold that too, at least in the most part. I have no objection to innovations at all, but we tend to, the younger element of our business tend to gravitate towards rock music, and rather than, even what we call the traditional folk music has become rock band style.
Aye.
Not that I have any strong feelings about it particularly, but who knows what, after we're long gone, what will they be doing in 50 years' time? Well, that will be up to them.
That's it. But you make a very valid point that the music has to be jealously guarded to a great extent, because if you're wanting to express the music along with other instruments, that's all very well in a concert platform away from a competition, and the competition is designed to perhaps show off the best of the Great Highland bagpipe and the music that's expressed on it. And there's a time and place for other instruments to come in and overpower that Great Highland bagpipe on a stage, to a greater or a smaller extent.
Yes.
But we are still in the business of competing and displaying all its best with the Great Highland bagpipe.
Yes, indeed. But of course, there's room for that. At the Scottish Schools competition, they have an avant-garde competition where the young bands, they introduce other instruments and play, and they're judged by people from the folk scene rather than the pipe band scene. And I think there's room for that. Of course there is, for the creativity. And to keep interest in the instrument, we have got to, I think, take that on board and accommodate that. If we try to stifle development, then it'll just become the boring old music. And as it is, it's very much a minority audience, the pipe band world, as compared to other genres.
Honours and decorations, just to close here, could you tell me the Queen's Volunteer Reserves Medal and the circumstances, that sort of thing? What is it?
Well, it is a decoration which is awarded to members of reserve forces to recognise service to the reserve forces. It was instituted in 1999, and it's the only new honour that was instituted in the reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And there are a maximum of 7 of these decorations awarded twice a year. And the Queen's New Year honours, or the King's the New Year's honours and the birthday honours. And the first ones were issued in 1999. I got mine in 2000, and I went to Buckingham Palace and was decorated by Her Majesty personally. So
that's
it comes
fantastic.
with an investiture. And in fact, this Saturday, they have an association, the KVRM and QVRM association. So I'm going to a reception of up in Edinburgh Castle this coming Saturday.
That's wonderful.
Which I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
You get a wee curly sandwich.
Well, yes, I think we get vol au vents and a wee glass of wine, which will be. I'm taking the car, so I'll just have to stick to orange juice.
Well, but it'll be nice meeting all these people again. What about the Imperial Service Medal 2016?
Oh, that was just for, I worked in the civil service for many years. So that was just an award for 25 years. After certain grades, that's awarded after 25 years service.
What did you do in the civil service? We've never touched in your working life.
Well, I've been retired for 8 years now. I started off with the Inland Revenue, which became HM Revenue and Customs, and I spent 40 years in the job with them.
A very powerful man.
Well, I wouldn't say so. I probably wasn't the department's best asset because I spent my years trying to get people money back.
That's quite funny.
Rather than trying to
right.
From the.
Okay, Volunteer Reserve Service Medal 1998. What was that about?
Oh, that is just it used to be called the TA Efficiency Medal. And it's now awarded after 10 years service. You've got to attend so many camps and pass your tests, and it now entitles you to the post nominals VR after your name as well, that you hold the Volunteer Reserves Medal.
Well, you've had a lot of fun in your life, eh?
Absolutely, aye. I mean, life comes. You have these little corners you come to in your life,
Aye.
Like, for example, when I met Sammy Drummond when I was 12 years old in Sochi, and he took me to their Giles and Stirling. Now, that was a life changer. Um, Absolutely a life changer. It changed everything. And there were other corners in life, and we've all experienced that, of course, uh,
Yeah.
through
And,
our journey.
we never, because it's getting dark now, I've been speaking that long. Uh, we never got on to the overseas judging and all that sort of stuff, but
Yes.
you've had a lot of fun there as well.
Well, absolutely. Well, the Jakarta thing started in 1984. I
Mm-hmm.
got a phone call from Bob Nichol uh, from Glasgow at the RSPBA headquarters. And Bob said, "Would you like to go to Jakarta?" And I said, "Certainly, Bob, where is it?"
Aye,
He
aye.
said, "It's Indonesia." Right. How long for? "Oh, it's just for the weekend."
The weekend.
Well, I went out myself the first time. It developed after that, and more judges
Aye.
went. But I went out on my own the first time. It was the St Andrews Society of Java, and they wanted somebody a judge who was still playing and who could still give a recital. So I took the pipes out there, and I remember standing in the airport at Jakarta after I arrived after that long journey, and thinking, I hope somebody will come and pick me up.
Aye,
And
exactly. Aye.
I remember standing there, right? If nobody comes, I'll get in touch with the British Embassy.
Aye.
These were the thoughts that went through my mind, and because the transport was late and picked me up, I had to hang about for about 15 minutes. But it turned out to be great trips, and on the back of that, I got trips to Hong Kong. Bob Shepherd and I went one year. Wilson Young, John Ferguson, all great old colleagues on the panel.
Yes, aye,
George
absolutely.
Shepherd and Kieran Murdaunt went another year with me, uh, and we had great fun, as well, of course, as the serious business of adjudicating. We've got to fit some fun in at the same time. Yeah,
Aye, but you're helping to elevate the general standard throughout the world, and be telling them exactly what you're looking for and all the rest of it. It's
well,
great.
yes,
Yeah.
well, that's right. Of course, the which is the serious business of what we do. Absolutely.
Aye,
Uh,
aye, aye,
yeah,
fantastic. But Peter, we could talk here all day as
yeah,
usual,
absolutely.
and we could run this into a book. And we've only lightly touched on your life
Yeah,
and piping, but it's been particularly fascinating. I shall edit accordingly and cut
yes,
myself out, and we should manage to cut it down to a reasonable size for
yes.
the audience that love it. Somebody phoned me yesterday and said it's a great thing, and Pipers'Persuasion, and they enjoyed it and this
Well,
and that
that's
thing.
good,
So,
Alan. And
aye,
it's after we're gone, I suppose there's a wee record there for the future.
aye, as long
And
as somebody looks after it, Peter.
I remember telling a story. I was across in Holland with the Highlanders, First Battalion, the Highlanders. We went across there. It was a celebration of liberation of Holland in 1994, and we're sitting having a drink with the guys there. Durrell McIntyre and a lot of the boys, Mike Gray and
Mm-hmm.
guys who were competing.
Yes.
A lot of them competing in the solos then. And I remember just relating my experiences with being taught by John McClellan. And they were sitting in silence listening to me, just to hear. And I said to Donald McIntyre, what? I just asked him, why did they find that so interesting? He said, "Peter," said, "because you knew John McClellan, you knew John McFadden.
Yeah,
Um, they're only names to us. And it's
that's
great,
right.
Ronnie McCallum, and it's great to hear somebody talking about them on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your program here, Alan, is a great thing in that respect too, because if anybody, youngsters are watching this in 50 years' time and saying, you know, who are these old so-and-sos, you know, so there's
Aye.
there's a wee insight into their personalities and character that that'll
Well,
be
it
there
gives
for a
them,
while.
I maybe steers them to finding out more about the art of piping and one
Well,
thing.
yes, hopefully.
Peter, thanks very much for your time. And we're just going to close now.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I'd say many thanks from Piper's Persuasion. All the best here.
Cheers, Alan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.